And we're on. So, welcome everybody to the third edition. I believe this is Mark's third appearance. And because the first two um, garnered such a positive response, the steering committee of POK invited Mark back to have a permanent, like once a month spot. So that I think that's a really good development and very positive sign that
Yeah.
Mark is having a kind of a very good impact here on our community. Um, uh, I'm assuming most of you are familiar with Mark, but just real briefly, he's got a trilogy. The third book, I don't, is it published, Mark, yet?
Yes,
The
it
third
just
book.
came out. Yes, it's just released.
Okay, well, the first two, one is Enlightenment Behind the Scenes. It's a nice short book. And then the second one of the trilogy is Being While Knowing You Are Not. And what's the third title, Mark? We can get that on Amazon.
Thank you. The third book is called The Triunistic Model of Reality, and the subtitle is What It Is, What It Does, and What It Emerges As.
So, Mark, I have a question for you to kick off today's um,
4th of
installment.
July, yes. Oh.
Here's my question. What are we going to do today?
Fireworks. Oh, I'm in Florida, so fireworks. No, I'm teasing. Actually, I wanted to still continue on the same thread as our last talk. Each talk that we had, starting with the three things, the three qualities to have before you practice, has led to new thoughts. So after the last talk that we had, when it was going on to surrendering and not defending yourself, which, by the way, that was a spontaneous talk, because when I was talking about surrendering, I didn't realize I forgot how important the not defending yourself part was. So the whole next talk was devoted to that. Well, even in that talk, someone brought up a really good question that got me thinking afterwards. So that's what I'm going to continue on with this one. So if you remember, or if you don't, I'll just remind you, the last one we talked about the power of, or I should say, freeing up your power by stopping defending yourself. And I was talking about bending and, basically going through life as if knowing you're always going to be the adult in the room. You're always going to be the one that's going to, bend to the situation, for the situation. You're the one that's always going to be looking out for the whole. So when I said this, there was a really good question. And that's the one that I want to continue with today. So the question was, okay, but, and obviously I'm paraphrasing because, it was a quick conversation, but somebody brought up the common point of, okay, well, in my situation, I'm a boss. So I'm used to, it's practical for me that I have to, tell people what to do, or even getting to something where there's a lot of, back and forth, trying to, get the job done at the company. So that's what I want to talk about today. So the title that I had them write was Going Straight is a Spiral. And so what I mean by that, it's a takeoff of a Zen expression, which is only go straight. So the Zen expression is just only go straight. So it's basically, you're always sticking to with, or I guess the American expression would be stay in your movie. You stay with what you're doing, with what you are. You have a plan, you have a life, values, and so you stay with your thing and don't be swayed by other people's.
And I think the expression is "stay in your lane." We hear that all
Stay
the
in
time.
your lane. There
Stay
you
in
go.
your lane. And
Okay.
I missed the second part of yours. Your title is Going Straight. What was the rest of it?
Going straight is a spiral. And what I mean by that is, so if you look at a spiral is, it's going around in circle, but it's always still going straight. No matter what, it's always going straight. So what I mean by that is, so only go straight is stick with your things. The first thing that I talked about was setting your agenda. basically making the commitment to yourself, taking the time to, again, start with that the brutal honesty, and realizing what your path is and what your commitment is. And then at that point, it gets easy, because every situation in life, you're reminding yourself of the commitment that you made, that you're the real agenda that you're playing. You're not playing the little game of trying to win everything, which is what the human game is, which is to always be on top, always, what do they call it? Jockeying for position, to always come up. So that is the game, whether it's being competition or trying to make yourself look good or whatever, it's always jockeying for position. And you've made the commitment that you're not playing that game. Your commitment is to drop all the struggle. That's the commitment that you've made. So anytime you're with people or anything, they're always in a different agenda than you are, because you're in a very unpopular agenda, which is to simply not continue the struggle, which is what most people, are doing. So it's always going to be up to you. So by going straight, though, and this goes back to the question where somebody's saying, okay, but there's always going to be situations in life where I can't just bend and I can't just do what people want. So I wanted to clarify that, because, and I just saw a quote saying stick to your guns. I like that. That's good. So what I mean by that is going back to going straight is a spiral. So if I'm telling you only go straight, so let's say if we're in the city, and to get to me, the direction I want to tell you is to go north. So if you're going to go north and you have to go straight, the best way to get to me is to go straight. So when you go down the city blocks, at some point you're going to hit one-way streets. So to continue going north, sometimes you're going to have to take a right, or sometimes you're going to have to take a left, but you're bending around, continuing in your path straight. So the point is, you're always going straight. You're always continuing on your path. You're staying with your commitment, with your agenda, but sometimes going straight will include bending, going to the left or going to the right. But it's not like to be thought of as like a rule to where no matter what the situation is, always to do what somebody else says. That's not the heart of it. The heart of it is, like I said, to just go straight, continue with your plan, continue with your day. And your day is basically just to be mindful and to not get caught up in any struggle. So that's your agenda. And then if somebody else has a conflicting agenda, then it's basically up for you to just stay in your lane. So let's take an example of you being a boss, and then somebody, you have to correct somebody, or even have a back and forth because they're having ideas that clash with your ideas. What I mean by the bending is always, obviously, by going straight, try to do what you want. But if you don't get what you want, then you just bend and you adapt to whatever it is. So it's not like from the get-go you're walking out there like a piece of mush saying, I'm not going to want anything, I'm not going to look anything. You are always going straight. You're continuing with whatever you want, whatever your day's consisting of. It's just the difference of you're trying to do something, but if you don't, as simple as that, you just adapt and you move around to it. So it's not something static. It's something, as I've said before, should be dynamic and spontaneous, something that, comes from your heart instead of just something you've read as a rule. So that's why when I say only go straight, sometimes it's a spiral, because sometimes going straight is going to be turning, going left or right, yielding to always go back straight. But the heart of it is always going to be going north, regardless of the twists and turns. So unlike last time, what I want to do is, thank you, Kirk. Before I go too far into things, because I much more benefit from hearing from you guys. As you said, every single topic I've had has been sparked from questions like this. So even before I go forward, every chunk that I put out, I want to see if we have any questions out first. Or, by the way, if we have any questions along the way, just raise your hand. But I want to stop now to ask if there's any questions before I go into anything else, just because I think for me that always inspires better thoughts that you guys have. Oh, so first of all, did that answer any questions, or did that clarify the going straight, or the bending, and for other people, to not be something that's thought of as a rule? Oh, Gary, go ahead.
Oh no, Mark, I didn't raise my hand. That's like a thumbs up. Yeah, I
Oh,
thought you did a very good clarification. I don't know if you're watching the chat. I think you alluded to it, but
oh no, no, I don't. I just saw it happen to look down. I don't know how to pull that up. It just one
the
happened
reason,
to come up.
yeah, the reason why I say that is because I'll monitor the chat in case anything comes up there. Sometimes people don't like to come on; they like to write in the chat. Now,
Oh, okay.
Arlette earlier had a question. She said, "What?" I'm assuming she was talking about whatever you were referring to at the time. Is that deliberate living? So,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's perfect. That's what I mean. But whoever said deliberate living, that's what I mean by mindfulness. When I was talking about mindful, um, your only intention, anybody that's into this, is to always be present, always be aware, always be mindful. So it's basically like I said, that's the only decision you've made for yourself. That's the only commitment that you've made for yourself, is that um, I'm going to be present. I'm going to be mindful. I'm going to take myself into that situation. But like I'm saying, everybody else in life is not going to be having that agenda. That's the most important part you have to prepare for, is everybody else. We're swimming against the stream. There was somebody, I don't know if on this chat I was talking about, there's this guy, Donald Hoffman, who wrote a book about virtual reality. He's got a theory that the whole world is awareness and it's just a virtual reality. But what he noticed, this is a psychologist or a cognitive psychologist, but what he noted was there's no fitness points for enlightenment. In other words, uh, reality rewards us for rewards us with fitness points for all these things, whether it be getting healthy, having relationships, but it doesn't reward us for practicing enlightenment. It doesn't have any fitness points. And so that is an example of what I mean by you're always going to be going against the stream. You're living in a world where people are having a completely opposite agenda of you, and you're going to be the only one that has your agenda. So that's what I mean by you're always going to have to be bending to them, because you're basically living in a world to where they're about control and you're about allowance. So it's basically you're playing a whole different game. Everybody else is playing a game. They think the game is who can collect the most points, and your game is thinking who could become the most less. So it's it's there's a clash between what you're doing and what everybody else is doing. So that's why you're always going to be having the bending, because your goals and your wants are going to be in conflict with the majority. So I forgot what deliberate living. So yes, that is exactly what I mean by deliberate modeling. And I see someone had their Donald Hoffman. Yes, that's exactly it. Okay. Okay. All right. So if there's no questions, then the next thing I wanted to talk about before that, are there any questions about that, about the deliberate living? Okay. Then the next thing that I wanted to talk about actually comes off that last point, which is that the most important part of this practice is that it has to be 100%. Everything else in life, we could divvy up. You could say, like, let's say if you wanted to do anything else in life, you could fracture your time and your energy and your resources into many different things. But in this situation, all those many different things are going to be counteractive to this practice. So this is the one thing that you have to be all in on. It has to be something that it has to be 100%, because there's going to be so many other things that are going to be diametrically opposed to it, that most things in life, you can put 50% effort and then 25% effort and 10% effort and 15% effort towards all these different things accumulating to 100%. But the difference with this is it has to be the one thing that you're given 100% to, just for the reason that everything else is going to be diametrically opposed. So everything else would have to be second, just because of the fact that this is going to take up not only so much of the resources, but anything else would be diametrically opposed. Oh, and I see Gary's got a hand up. See, I'm getting better at this. And now I'm looking out for hands.
This is good, Mark. When I put my hand up, it means probably that there's a question in the chat, and so you address it you address it like whenever you feel there's a good moment.
Okay.
It's not like a pressing thing. So Patricia did have a question. She says, when you were talking about going against the grain of society, so they're about control and you're about, and she didn't know if you said balance or not. In other words, if going with the grain, the people who are whatever about control, and we're about, you say balance.
Oh no, allowance. I'm sorry. Allowance. Allowing. So what I mean by allowance is that if you just notice, I mean, just go about life and just notice the, conversations, notice the relationships, notice TV, notice our culture, notice everything. It's like I think I used the expression, the clear common thing that we're doing in all situations is jockeying for position. And what I mean by jockeying for position is either trying to make yourself look good, trying to present yourself in the best light, trying to, or sometimes even an aggressive thing of actually be the best one, the obnoxious person who's got to have the best this on the street, or the what's the expression, keeping up with the Joneses. That's the norm. And it's what do you call it? It's such a part of our lives growing up. I mean, think about it. I mean, I used to think about that. All the games we used to play, all these competitive games we used to play where we celebrate our win over others, and we don't even think about it. At 2-3 years old, where you're doing these things, and I'm not saying the alternative is the whole thing where everybody gets a trophy and there's no anything like that. I just always thought it was odd that when growing up, there was no compassion for the loser. You know what I mean? I just thought it was a weird thing, that it was a kind of like a winners take all thing. It was a cutthroat where the winner gets everything, and that we set it up like that. And if you think about it, a society or culture could be set up in any way. The only thing we know, and I think I touched upon this in the last one, the only thing we know is what our generation before taught us. And then the only thing they know is the generation before they taught us. But us as humans, even with the very particular brains that we have, there's infinite permutations and possibilities of cultures and possibilities we could be doing. So that's why I'm saying that I'm always, non-judgmental with people, because we really don't know. We've landed in this situation, and we're adapting in the best way that we know, doing the things that we know, coping with the best things that we know how to cope. But really, society can be, and will be, by the way, because we still have a future, it's going to go through many twists and turns where there's different cultural norms and there's different things that are supposedly good and then supposedly bad. But like I said, so life is all, but your path is a different path. Everybody that we know, at least for the history, is always on the path of, for the lack of the better word, jockeying for position, always trying to be ahead. But that's not your thing. If you're into this, your path is more into allowance. And what I mean by allowance is not trying to control things, but instead just observing things and allowing them. Which takes me right back to the whole conversation. When people hear these words, to just go through life being allowing or bending, I could see why it sounds like you're saying just going through life as a piece of mush, like a cartoon character. I could understand that. But like I said, you know what I'd like? This is what I wrote down. This is what I wanted to bring up. Something that's always resonated with me is the I don't know who came up with this, but I think it's the Lord's Prayer or the Serenity Prayer. But it's very simple, and I'm sure everybody knows this. Uh, I, I'm paraphrasing, but the essence is, um, what is it? Do the things that you can, and then accept the things that you can't, and then the wisdom to know the difference. I don't know the actual phrase, but it's something like that. Basically, going through life trying to get what you're trying to get done. But if you can't get it, then you just adapt and you move. So that's what I'm talking about. Allow it. When you go to the restaurant, you order your soup, but if they don't have it quickly, you're just on to the next thing. All right, you don't got that soup, I'm on to the next thing. It doesn't mean you present yourself to the waiter and say, all right, I don't know what I want. Just bring me something, whatever you feel like. Go through life, just not even, just being mindful of yourself, doing what you're doing. But then when you don't get what you want, even talking to people, try. But if you don't, just realize when you have to bend or anything. Basically, as I'm saying this, I'm realizing the whole thing is really just being consistent with not struggling anymore. You've made the commitment not to struggle. So when you're moving through life, like I said, if you're going through a city corner and you're trying to go north, by not struggling would be trying to bust through and go north, even when clearly there's an obstacle in the way. Not struggling would just be bending, not getting your way, and not going north for a minute, going, east, west, or perhaps even south if you have to continue north. Because you know your way. You're being consistent. You're staying on your way, and so you're the one that's always going to be bending. And just to go through life knowing that you're always going to be the one that's bending because you're staying true to your thing. Your thing, you're the commitment that you've made to yourself is to just drop the struggle. You've realized you don't want to go through life struggling with whatever is. It doesn't mean, once again, it doesn't mean you're never trying to change what is. Fine, go through life, try to change what is. But the minute you find that you can't change it, you're accepting it. So once again, it goes back to the spiral. The straight line thing, should never be seen as a rule. It should be taken something as a heart, something coming from the heart, something that you're following, almost like a beacon. Almost like a moth is attracted to a flame, the same way that you're attracted to just not struggling with things. And every day you're going to learn something new, whether you're learning to not struggle with yourself internally, whether it's just, having internal thoughts and you're thinking, okay, I'm not going to struggle with these internal thoughts, or whether you're going through life, whether it's a struggle with, let's just say, what do you call it? An idea, a concept, sometimes like politics, sometimes they're going through just, I can't stand the rulers like this conceptually. That could be a struggle. But what we were talking about earlier was just specifically, struggles with others as we go out in life, because that's the situation where you're, going to have to be bending. But all these situations, whether you're struggling with yourself, whether you're struggling with big ideas, concepts, humanity, existence, that could be something. The whole thing that you're practicing is just to be giving up that struggle, because you're the opposite of being aligned with reality. You're fighting reality. You're fighting what is. So, I'm sorry, I gotta see a hand. And by the way, I'm really bad at seeing text. Just to let everybody know, I'm not going to be able to keep up with the text. Just with
No, Mark.
Yeah.
Mark. That's why I'm going to monitor.
Okay.
And
Thank you. Yeah.
there's a lot of comments, but if something pops out like the question
Yeah.
is up, I'll raise my hand.
I appreciate it. And this is all my fault. I'm new to the internet, new to things, and I'm probably ADD also. So I feel like if I look over to the right, I'm gonna have to ignore everybody. So I would definitely wave your hands if everybody, for now, hopefully I'll get better at this. But Arlette, Gaddy, how you doing today?
Thank you. Hi. I have a question. You talked about 100% commitment, right? You
Yes.
said that. Can you elaborate a little bit more in detail what you mean by that? Because there are many things that we can be committed to. From what I understand from you, that you say you mean that this deliberate living, or let's say this commitment to truth, is to be committed to this 100%, because there are all other things in life. I know that for me, the most important thing is that, of course, it is the most important, but I can be 100% committed in a lot of things that I'm doing too.
I
And,
like that. Oh,
and I see it as a part of the path of the work, not only in meditation and spiritual meetings, but in the everyday, everything that I'm doing, I try, how I understand that. I just wanted to ask you about that, how you see that.
thank you. No, the only thing I'll say is I think what you said is a lot more along the lines of what I wanted to say. I think what you said is actually better. If I could have said what I wanted to say, I would have rather you spoken for me, Arlette. So no, I only want to back up what you said. I don't want to go back and try to reshape what I said. Instead, I want to jump off of what you said. I want to say I completely agree with Arlette, and I'll just add more to that because everything that she says 100 consistent with what I'm saying. So I'll add to that. So what I mean by that, because I did say, if you want to get into other things, you could do 50% this and 25% this, but with this, you have to be 100%. So here's why I said that. Because what I was thinking was, let's say if you're playing soccer or if you're a coin collector or whatever your hobby is, that's something you could pick up and you could put down. So you can say, I'm getting into soccer now. Now I get that soccer thing out of my brain. Now I'm going to recompartmentalize and I'm going to get into the financial aspect of my life or the romantic aspect of my life. Those are things you could pick up and put down. And that's what I mean. That's what I meant by most things are not 100%. You're not thinking about soccer 24 hours a day. You're not thinking about romance 24 hours a day or business 24 hours a day. But what Arlette pointed out was when she's going through life, she is giving 100% to everything, whether it be her soccer playing, her romance, or her business. Everything that she's given 100%. So that is a more important point. I applaud you for that. And I'm glad that you gave me the opportunity to clarify what I meant by the 100%, 25, 10% and all that. So what I really meant by that was, as again, with soccer, you could put all your energy into it, and then you could put that down, and then you could pick up different parts of your life. But the mindfulness part of my life, it never goes away. As she said, you're bringing it with you into the soccer field. You're bringing it with you into your romance. You're bringing it to you in your business field. That's something that's always going to be 100%. You're always going to be practicing mindfulness no matter what in any situation. It's not going to be something you're going to be putting down. That's maybe a better way of putting it. By the 100%. That's not something you're going to pick. It's not something to compartmentalize. It's not something that's just a part of your life and you're bringing it out in certain situations where like, okay, this is a situation where it's appropriate to be mindful. No, that 100% that Arlette is talking about should be practiced 100% of the time. And not should like a moral thing, but just, for yourself as someone committed onto the path, whenever you remember that you've taken that commitment and that you're on this path and you're on a different path than most people, and just reminding yourself you're on that path. So thank you, Arlette. I really appreciate that.
Excuse me, I just wanted to ask, it came to my mind now that you talk, that it's about to be unified, one with myself. Every part is one in 100%. To be one in every situation as much as possible, not one thing here, one thing there. It's the same. 100% is being unified, all the parts of me. That's how I understand it. Yeah,
I like that. And I liked how you added a word I didn't even use, but I'm glad that I'm glad that you brought it up, the unifying. Because when you're practicing this, you're unifying whatever situation you're in, whether it's a colleague at work or a business partner. By you coming into the situation, being aware and being mindful, you're unifying that situation for everybody, and you'll see it. You'll see everybody change. In the last talk I had, I don't know if everybody was there, so I'll just repeat it. I said, one thing that I discovered was that there's only room enough for one ego in the room. So just allow people, the other to be that ego, and then you're going to find you unify it. And then that ego actually melts and becomes warm because they find out there is no struggle. Once people find out there is not going to be a struggle, that you're not in a, what's that called, jockeying for position, and you're not trying to take their position, you're trying to dominate, people turn into like little kitty cats on their back. They want to be like that, but we're trained to always put our best forward and to try to appear your best. So it translates in this thing where it's always a one-upmanship. I want to show how good I'm doing financially, or my looks, or whatever it is. It's so ingrained into us that like I said, it's going to feel like you're swimming against the stream, because your thing is going to be very awkward and very, it kind of feels like starving. That's a feeling I kept bringing up over and over again. It feels like you're starving because you're depriving yourself of something, of an energy exchange. And ever since I've been having these conversations, I'm even aware of tiny, tiny little things. And I'll give you an example. And the reason I want to give you this example is I want to give you an example of why you shouldn't be judgmental with yourself, why you should be easier with yourself. The attitude should be loving and gentle with yourself and compassionate with yourself. So when I give you this example, I'm giving this to you not to show that like, oh, wow, he's giving more examples of how he's catching himself doing crazy stuff and judging himself. No, it's just something I notice, and then I just let it, disappear. I don't take anything else more of it than just noticing it. But I was noticing something in my language. As I'm talking to my wife, I'll every once in a while, or quite often, I'll follow it with the statement, "Isn't that neat?" So I'll say something, I'll say, "Isn't that neat?" or "Isn't that neat?" And I'm just picking up from these conversations. I was like, wow, even that is like just a subtle thing to make sure that I'm understood. Just a subtle little unconscious little tick that you throw on a tag into the end of the sentence to saying, well, isn't that neat? Like to say, are you understood? So the reason that I mention this is because as I realize I'm having that thought, the thought isn't like a judgment, like, oh, there you go, what a screw up. Here you are, judging isn't that neat? You want her to think about you. It's not in that heart. It's just an observation of, oh, wow, there's another example of me slightly trying to build myself. Or, and when I say build myself, it doesn't have to be anything big. It's just creating yourself that you're an I, that you're a person. It's another I thought. I like this, I like that, I do that. It's just something to be noticed. It's not something to be judged or to look at like, well, here I go being a screw it up again, thinking. No, it's just something you notice and you let it go with all the other thoughts. Which takes me back to the most important practice that I always mention, it'll probably come up in any talk, is the thing that I practiced that I got from Dzogchen, saying it's okay to, let's say, have thoughts, but just don't follow those thoughts. But then if you have that thought, then that's fine. Just don't follow that thought. But if you do have that thought, that's fine. Just don't follow that thought. The whole thing is just to show you that in any moment you could drop the struggle. In any moment. All these realizations are not for you to be judging yourself or to be thinking, oh, there goes my crazy mind again. They're just observations like, oh, wow, that's neat. This is how my mind's working. Subtle little things I'm noticing where I'm building myself up, or I'm creating myself and I'm creating this thing. It shouldn't be followed with the thought of, oh, crap, that's another sign of me screwing up. No, it's beautiful. You've witnessed it, and it moves along. All these thoughts and all these feelings and all these even identifications, they want to show themselves and they want to move on. Everything that happens in your realm of imagination, whether it be your thoughts or the actual appearances, they want to move on. Everything's impermanent. Everything's trying to move on. The only thing that we do is we just struggle with what is, causing more ripples that you struggle with to try to keep down those ripples, which cause you to take down more ripples. So, oops, something's beeping. All right. So again, I don't want to ramble too long without opening it up. So does anybody have any questions or comments or anything on that? Anything that I touched on to elaborate on? So everything's crystal clear. Everybody's got a 100%. Becky, thank you, Becky. Thank you. Are you going to help me? Go ahead.
Yes, I'm going to help. Something that you said a few meetings ago resonated for me, and it's something that I go back to many, many times, which is when you said go wordless.
Oh, yes, as a practice, yes.
Yeah, I thought of that when you were saying, so you have a thought and then you have a thought, and I don't remember exactly what it was you said, but I found that sometimes there's that point when the image is there and that's it.
Yeah, I'm glad. So since that talk, just out of curiosity, were you able to practice that? Did you put that in a practice of, you did?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
that's beautiful. That's great. I'm super glad to hear that.
And we actually, some of the people who were in this community 2 years ago, we were taught a practice of just relaxing our jaw, relaxing the mouth.
Yeah.
And it brought me back to that, because there's a tendency to like sub-vocalize when your mind is doing that.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
it brought me back. But I just love the, going wordless, like when, for lack of a better way to say it, when I'm in like a chatty state, going wordless is really nice.
Yeah. Okay. Now you brought up something else too. In case I forget the second part, because I want to start with the first part I wanted to talk about. Remind me about the starving part. So if I go on to this and I forget to go into starving, that's the second part I want to go into. But the first part I want to go into that you mentioned, you remind me of the energy that's behind this. So when I first discovered this practice of no words, I'll remind everybody where it came from. It came from a point where I was really kind of disgusted with myself. I was really, in my book, the chapter of it that I titled was called The Last Desire. And the last desire was the desire to desire nothing. I recognize that the desire to desire nothing is a desire. It's a desire to desire nothing, but it was my last desire. I really desire, I was so sick of myself. I really was, in a tortured state where I was always constantly aware of my thoughts of the I affirmations and I this, and I was torturing myself, just like, oh my God, you're just nonstop creating yourself and building yourself, and enough is enough, So it was coming from that mindset when I discovered this. So, I'm skipping a step. From that came a commitment where I just said, you know what, I want to shut the whole thing down. I want to shut down thinking. I'm sick of it. I'm done with my mind. I'm just not going to follow it anymore. I'm just going to, I got my hand on the lion's tail and I'm just not going to let go. So I went into that. Okay. So as I went into it, you realize you can't stop your thoughts. And that's the whole joke. You can't. Your thoughts are something that naturally arise. They're part of the body. If you try to stop them, it's an aversion. An aversion is the same thing as attachment. Attachment is a form of aversion. So if you're trying to get rid of your thoughts, it's no different than you being attached to your thoughts. So really, the practice is not to avoid thoughts or to think of anything thoughts. It's just to be the space for the thoughts, not attach or avoid them. So for me, when I did make that commitment to stop my thoughts, not avoid, I wasn't going that far, but I was, committed to not following them. That practice came up spontaneously because I realized I can't stop this energy. There's this energy that's here, and there's this energy is being alive. This is the energy of being awareness. This is the energy of being conscious awareness. So you can't stop that energy, but yet I still wanted to practice that thing where I'm not feeling that that energy interpreted as I this, I that, I like this, I'm building this, I'm doing that. So that's when I spontaneously came up with the practice to say, okay, go ahead. I know there's a lot of feelings here. I know there's a lot of energy. I could feel all this energy. Go ahead and do your best, express all that energy, but you're not going to do it through the medium of words. So that's a way where you could sneakily practice kind of tricking your thoughts, because usually the only way you could go about this is to try to say, I'm going to try to not think. I'm going to try to have silence. and then, the world intrudes in your thoughts. Coming up with this approach, you're not trying to avoid or even attach the energy. You're allowing the energy, but just not the mode of it. And you could feel, and maybe, I don't know if Becky could speak to this, but there's almost like a confusion in the mind to where it doesn't know what to do. And that's what reminded me of this energy. So there's this energy still there, but yet it's not able to be used. It's not able to have an outlet of the words. It's not able to be fused, into words, which spontaneously, naturally brings me into the thing that I asked you to remind me of, so you don't have to, which is the starvation. So that brings me back to the feeling of starvation that you're going to have, because you have this energy and you want to share, you want to, I guess, release this energy. So by you not letting this energy come out in the form of words, you're going to feel this feeling of starving, because it's a feeling of the energy not being able to get expended. And we're used to expending that energy. We're used to having this thing where we are affirming ourselves, where we are building ourselves and reminding ourselves that we are. Because remember, we're just like barely holding on to this reality. And in reality, everything is just barely being held together with our attention. If we did not have this intense intention on ourselves of creating ourselves, nothing would be able to appear. So this is being held together by an incredible tension to begin with. So the starving. So you're going to experience starving because we're so used to this momentum of building ourselves and creating ourselves every moment. So you're going to feel this energy of, I'm feeling like I'm missing something. I feel like I need to do something. And this could either be in situations with talking to people where you don't clarify yourself because it's you realize this is only, it's not really necessary to clarify for myself. It's really only to further the image of me and create the image of me, and you're no longer invested in that, so you don't follow that normal path. It's going to feel a bit like starving, like you're not getting something that you're used to getting. And what I talked about last time was getting used to that feeling of starving, because that feeling of starving actually gets transmuted into energy, a high energy. But I talked about that so much, Tom, I don't want to get too repetitive. If people want me to talk more about that, I'll get into it. But I see Kirk has his hand up. But knowing Kirk, it's probably going to be a whole different subject. So what you got for me, Kirk? And thank you, by the way. You got to turn up your mic. It looks like you're muted. Yeah,
sorry about that.
Yeah.
So quick question. You were talking about being mindful of something north, or I call it a North Star. So that way it's not fixed, but it's still going north, and it's got an analogy in our society anyway of, what's my purpose as a human now? Well, it's my North Star. So are you saying that the mindful that you're talking about towards north is what? So is it a destination, or do you just know that you're on the path? Or
yes.
And where is awareness? You haven't to my main, I haven't seen awareness. Is awareness in here at all?
Yes. Well, I want to go back to your first thing, because you said something really good, and I don't want to lose that, because where is awareness is going to be easy to remember. But what you got, what was the first thing? Oh, north. Yes. Okay. Yes. Yes. That is the practice. And so the North Star, I like that. So the North Star is both, actually. So to answer your question, it is the practice and it is the destination, because remember, your only destination is to be mindful, as Arlette pointed out, or to be 100%, to be present. So your only practice is to be mindful. There's really no other practice, because remember, you're practicing awareness because that's what you are. Everybody's here because they want to wake up to who they are. Well, what you are is awareness. So the only practice you can possibly practice is awareness, because that's all there is awareness. So to answer your question, it's both. It's a practice, but it's also the destination that you remind yourself to be on, anytime, especially. So let's say, so being mindfulness is your North Star. So you're always being mindful. Then there's a situation that comes up that throws you off. Remember, just reminding you of your agenda as opposed to getting swept up in other people's agenda. You're going to have to bend left or bend right. So actually, it's kind of a different point than the North Star. But to your overall point, yes, the mindfulness is both the practice and it's also the destination. Your destination should always to be mindful and to not let any situation throw you off, whether it's yourself throwing you off or society throwing you off or just ideas about society. In every situation, it has to be you to be the one to remind yourself, I'm about being mindful and I'm not about to go down this road of struggling, which is the opposite of mindful. It's always going to lead into a struggle, some kind of tension of you resisting what is, whether it's you resisting what is a conceptual thought, politics or religion, or humanity, or your own self, or an actual encounter with a person. So before I jump from that, did that answer your question, Kirk, about the North Star?
Yes, I think that people would want to move on to another subject.
Now,
But the one thing I would just throw before we leave this sector,
Yeah.
does ultimate truth or truth of self, does the self have an ultimate truth, or is that where is that? I mean, because
I like
that's
that question.
Go ahead.
I like that question. I appreciate that. For me, since I haven't came from any particular path or paths, I look at all those words, whether it be the self or the mind or awareness, or just anything that starts with the capital letter. So one thing I've noticed is, now I say I'm not committed, or I'm not part of any tradition. That is true, but most of my influence, the vast majority of my influence has been from Buddhism. So for me, studying, the words that they used were never the self. It was never the self. The self was something that didn't exist. And the operative word was awareness, was the capital A. Or sometimes even in Zen, it would be mind with the capital N. Then as I noticed, the internet came around and I started to talk to people that came from the Advaita route, or the Indian side, or especially Ramana Maharshi, it was the opposite, where the self was the only thing that was real. That's the S. So the S or the self gets the capital S, and awareness and mind is diminished. So mind would be a small m in the Advaita world, and self would be the capital S. So in the Hindu world, or the Ramana Maharshi world, all there is the self. And then in the Buddhist world, they flip it around and say, no, there is no self. There's only mind. So with a capital N. So to answer your question, what is the self? I think that's what you said, maybe. But so the Buddhists talk about something called anatta, the no self. When you get down to the root of it, all you're going to find is the no self. So the no self would be the self with a capital S. And like I said, I know from looking at Ramana Maharshi and Hindu things, they come at it the opposite. They say all really exists is the self with a capital S, and the mind is an illusion. So for myself, I've settled on now to just use two words. If anyone hasn't noticed, the one thing that I've settled on of all my practices, the only thing that I still really enjoy is Zen. And so I forget I don't know how to pronounce any of these guys, but Dogen, the way he has actually it's Banki, has the unborn mind. So basically, the unborn mind would be all there is. And what we do is we turn the unborn mind into thinking mind, or angry mind, or jealous mind, but it's all mind. So basically, the idea is that, or it could be self. Like I'm saying, if you want to look at the self, you could say all there is the self, the unborn self. You could say that. Let's just say the unborn. So we can say all there is the unborn self, but we turn the unborn self into thinking self, into angry self, but it's still always self. So the self is all there is. And it feels weird for me to say self, because like I said, my background has been Buddhism. So for me, you'll never hear me saying all there is the self and the self and the self. For me, that sounds foreign. But I recognize, probably more people are practicing Advaita and the Indian stuff than Buddhist stuff. So For me, I like the word mind. I like to look at it as, everything's awareness, everything is mind, and there is, the self is just an appearance in awareness. But the heart of it, I think people are all saying that is the same, whether you're saying all there is self, all there is mind, or all there is awareness. Actually, what I've settled on is all there is this, just this. That's my new favorite word, is just this, whatever you want to call this, just this. This is what is. And after this, then we start putting words to it. But before words, there's just this. And for me, that's what the operative thing is. And from my conditioning, like I said, I prefer the word awareness or mind. But to answer your question, I would say either all is the self or there is no self, depending upon, which way you're looking at the self. That's why I like how they just use the capital letters. Anytime they use a capital letter, that's the absolute, and the other one is an appearance. And the relationship, by the way, at some point, I'm going to start getting into the trinistic model, because that's really what explains all this. Basically, what we're talking about is the relationship between white light and the rainbow. So the white light would be the unmanifest. That would be the absolute. That would be what people refer to as, God. That's the absolute. And then the colors are the individuals. Those are the many. Those are the people. Those are the things. Those are what in Zen what they would call the myriad things. But in reality, if you understand light, the rainbow is light. The rainbow is nothing other but light, nothing other than light. So again, going back to the self, if you look at the self as the white light, then all the rainbow would be the individual little minds. But the truth is, you're simultaneously both. You're the rainbow and you're the light. Because when you look at a rainbow, the rainbow is never not the light. It's just the light appearing as a fragmented myriad. But it never stops for 1 second not being the light. The light is always the light. There could be nothing but light, but some situations make the light manifest or appear or emerge as a rainbow. But the most important thing, what we're talking about here today, is that the rainbow is never anything other but the light. It's always the light. It may appear to be yellow, green, red, all these things, but despite its appearance, it's actually white light, and it's not capable of being anything but white light. Just like you're not capable of being anything but Buddha mind. That's your true nature, but you appear as red, orange, yellow, all these different things, but it doesn't change the fact of what you actually intrinsically are. And I feel like we got way off course, because I don't even remember what the question was. Kirk, how'd you get me down that road?
I have a real quick question.
Go ahead.
How do you currently identify you? Like, do you identify at all if someone says, "Hey, Mark"? Do you identify with Mark, or are you, when you're identifying, I'm trying to understand, where do you place yourself in the story, if there is such a story that we're telling here?
Okay, I like that. So I would even put identification as something that's before me. Anything that could be observed is not you. So even the identification is something that happens out here. You witness the identification. So it's a spiraled question. What do you identify as? Because I witness the identify. You see what I'm saying? So yes, so you could say I identify as Mark because I answer to the name Mark, but I don't identify with that identifying. So to answer your question, in a two-part, yes, I could say identify as Mark because as you'd say, I got it everywhere, got on my ID, I answer to it, to that. But I see that the identification is even something that happens in front of me. So two things. One, that's why I'm saying everything's always simultaneous. You are the white light and you are the rainbow. Both are happening simultaneously. So yes, I could see the identification as Mark, and that's why I said at the beginning, it's not something to be judged. It's not something to be avoided. It's an appearance that happens. It's a dynamic. It's an action. So the activity of identifying is, once again, an event. It's a phenomena. It's a phenomena that you could observe. So that's not you. You're observing the identifying. So even if you get caught up in identifying, that's still yet just another event. It's another movement. It's another process. It's just another appearance. So I hope I'm answering your question, because I think I'd say yes and more. That's the answer. Yes and more. Yes, identifying as Mark and more. Or I don't know.
And are you the viewer? Like,
Yes.
are you, so it's from your perspective?
I'd say the viewer, but even that, if I was being really strict with it, I would still even say not the viewer. I would say just viewing, because I really don't feel like I'm a viewer. I just feel like just viewing. If I know that's a subtle, maybe nitpicking. But no, I don't feel like there's a viewer, because if I felt like there was a viewer, that would again be an appearance out there. There's just viewing, just it's happening. Viewing. All right. And I see, and I don't know if there was a limit, but we are coming up to an hour. I remember before that was always a thing. So if anybody has any questions before the hour ticks.
Well, Mark, speaking of limits, we don't really have a limit. We usually go hour and a half, but we can finish anytime. It's up to you. You make the call.
Okay.
Whenever you feel, we're complete.
Absolutely. Well, like I said, I get my inspiration from you guys. Everything that I've said, except for the first talk I thought of, but everything after that has been inspired from talking to you guys. So I really appreciate that. And actually, probably maybe at this point, if there are no more questions, then the next time I do have a talk, I'll start with a completely different subject, because the lack of questions indicates to me that you guys either you do get what I was saying, or you've already disregarded it and you're waiting for something else.
We
I'm
want
making sure you-
we want something new. No, I'm only kidding. Mark, I don't have a question necessarily, but I have a comment, and
Okay.
and I want to say this because what really impresses me about you and your whole realization or understanding in particular is that even though you did practice a little, correct me if I'm wrong, you did practice a little bit the Zen and with the Dzogchen tradition, but you're really not coming from a tradition. You're not representing a tradition per se, and yet I'll say this: you are, and everything you're about, and everything you're saying is completely 100% in line with the traditions, and I'm thinking specifically of the Shaiva Tantra point of view in particular, and of course Dzogchen too. But in Shaiva Tantra, we're saying just that. There is no viewer. There is no viewed. There's only viewing. So there's only the functioning. There's only the functioning of the totality. There are no subjects and objects per se. There's only this functioning of the totality of this. So even though you're not coming from a tradition, I'm saying I'm checking as you're talking about bing, 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 completely 100% in line with this 1,000-year-old tradition, which I love it. I'm totally engrossed in right now. And I see Patricia has a question, so let's go to her.
Very good. Hey, and real quick, Patricia, before you start I want to go on to Gary's momentum before I forget. Now I think I already forgot about the tradition thing. So go ahead, Patricia.
Okay, I just want to share a little metaphor that came up when you were talking about the light and the rainbow. Because recently there was an electrical storm, and in my skylight, it woke me up to that flashing of the light and, a reaction of some fear. But yet recently I saw a rainbow, a double rainbow, and oh, how pleasant and enjoyable. And so the metaphor is like that fear of total letting go. And the rainbow is more like those glimpses of awareness.
I like that a lot. I like that. And that's something I never even thought of. So once again, that's a whole perspective of the rainbow that's actually even obvious. That should come up. So no, I appreciate that. That is perfect. Thank you. You get the essence of what I was saying to that. That's why I think these natural objects are there for a reason. I think truth and reality is everywhere, no matter where we look. If we look at the water, if we look at the trees, if we look at the sky. And by the way, going back to the teachings, after 2002, when I had my final experience, I stopped reading completely, and then nature became my teacher. And then bouncing off of what Patricia was saying, that's when I really started to notice, because reality is nature. Everything, it can't be hidden. Little things like how when you look at the leaves, there's infinite permutations of leaves. They're all the same one, but there's slight variations. And you can see that's the way where nature works on everything. Nature is trying every single possibility, every single permutation. And so that's why also it's easy to not have any expectations for yourself and to be not judgmental for yourself or with others, because there has to be infinite permutations. There's going to be something on every step of the way. And I'll give an example of what I mean by that. You wouldn't look at a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old and say they're dysfunctional. Something's wrong with them because they can't read or they can't whatever adults could do. They're appropriate for what a 7-year-old is. So in nature, we allow that for things of our, in species because we see that, but we don't allow that for everything else. That everything else is a permutation of a stage leading up to something else. But we, I guess, have our own fixed idea of what we want. So when we see things that are not exactly what we want, we think that something's wrong. But if you go out in nature and you look, there's just infinite permutations, and every single thing's got a purpose. And even the things that seem bad, like the poisons, actually have a purpose. If you just look at it, actually everything does make sense. And again, I think I got sidetracked off of the rainbow thing. And Patricia, I see your hand up again. Is that still left up, or is that something? No, okay. Very good. All right, you take that down. Very good. Okay. All right. So if that's it, I'll go ahead and end it here. And like I said, next time I want to bring up something else, maybe even the trinistic model that I could talk about, since I just came out with that book too. Oh, by the way, speaking of which, I just did my first podcast with a guest, special guest Gary. So my website's up. I just got it up. I've talked about it before, but it was never finished. But if anybody wants to see Gary in the podcast or more, I also have a message board there too. Oh, Kathy, I'll get right back to you. Kathy, I see your hand up. But go to thisawarespace.com, thisawarespace. And it's got a message board where you could ask questions, podcast. And oh, by the way, if somebody wants to be a guest for a podcast, if you think you have a lot of things you want to talk about, contact me off air and we'll see if we could do a podcast. I really enjoyed the energy I got from Gary, and even these things. So if anybody wants to do a podcast and you got a lot on your mind, let me know. And also, okay, I think that's it. So go ahead, Kathy. Kathleen, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Kathy's fine.
Kathy.
Okay, I thought you were going to go on to another topic, so I didn't want to interrupt by asking.
Oh, okay.
questions.
No,
If
you're good.
ready to
Thank you.
finish, I have a question. When you were talking about starving by
Yourself.
not speaking, all of that, but then I think you said, so if you can stop that and hold that, then it goes to something more. But would you say what that is? What's that experience like?
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I don't even know if I said it this talk. You may be thinking about it. I don't remember saying it this time. Was it? Oh, wow. Okay. I don't remember saying it. But what I've been saying a lot, and I don't even remember saying it today, is, and maybe this is something different. So maybe that's why I'm thinking something different. If you look at my books, I always went through stages where I was going through periods of an incredible bliss, unprovoked, spontaneous bliss would just charge through me to the point where it was overwhelming. This last year, I just discovered something different, and this ties into what Kathleen was talking about, is I discovered instead, if I don't feel the bliss, when I feel this energy, when the energy presents itself, let's start there. When the energy presents itself, if I don't feel it, if I don't indulge in it, let's say, if I don't indulge in that energy, Well, first of all, let's start with if I do. If I do indulge the energy, all I do is I just feel incredible energy. It almost feels like it's unmanageable, like it's too much. You can't handle it. At least I can't handle it. But it feels like that. It feels like just so overwhelming, you can't handle it, but you're indulging it, you're experiencing it. So I had this feeling, it came up at the same time I was discussing the Bodhisattva vow with somebody. I was discussing the Bodhisattva vow, how the Buddhist automatically, or let's say spontaneously or naturally, included this concept called a Bodhisattva vow. And I call all these concepts because I think they are just concepts. To say, if you get enlightenment, that you'll forego enlightenment until you come back down to save all beings. So basically, Buddhists take a vow to say, once I get enlightenment, I'm going to forego the enlightenment. Instead, I'm going to return until I save all beings. And the reason this concept is there is to remind you that you are the others. There's no you and there's no others. There's no others to escape from. So true enlightenment would have to be you returning down to save others, because that's you. It's just, it's a concept of a spontaneous realization that there are no others. Everybody's me. And gosh, I'm having a hard time tying this back into your question. What was your question again? Kathleen, what did you ask me?
Well, it seemed like when you were talking about, not speaking, starving
The
yourself.
energy, yes.
defend
Okay, yes.
yourself, and that
Yes.
that would lead to something bigger.
Something else. Okay, that's it. Thank you. Okay, here we go. All right. So recently, when I started to feel this energy, I had the thought, I don't want to experience the energy. Instead, I was thought, what if I don't experience it? What if I don't indulge it? I don't experience it. If I don't experience it, it has to stay there. And if it stays there, what that means by staying there, it actually passes through me. When you get energy, when energy presents itself to you, you could either experience it yourself or you could let it pass through you. And so I got this image a long time ago of an author that I read at the Monroe Institute, talking about how he had a vision where he saw all these enlightened people. He says, when you get enlightenment, it looks like all these little energies hovering above the planet. And then what he saw was some of them, and I'm blowing the metaphor, but basically some of these things are either gobbling up all the energy for themselves and just eating it and experiencing it, and some of them are taking the energy and just deflecting it back down to earth. And so everybody could have this energy. So I'm thinking about the Bodhisattva vow because I'm writing about it. And I instinctively got that feeling, that memory of that book where a guy was seeing all these enlightened things above the earth. And some of them were taking the energy and feeling the positive energy. And some of them were just letting it pass through them and go into earth. And that's when I just had this instinct was I think this energy that I'm experiencing is probably not meant to be experienced by me. It's meant to slide through me. It's meant to pass through me. And all this experiencing this energy is me indulging in and using it like gasoline. So I had this instinct, this thought to say, I'm not going to experience this bliss anymore. All this bliss that's coming to me from now on, I'm not going to indulge it. I'm not going to experience it. I'm just going to allow it to pass through me. So that ties back into the thing that Kathleen was talking about. When I talk about by starving yourself, that is the transmutation, I guess, of the energy that we're talking about. So all there is energy. So we get this energy. So the energy could be experienced. So, okay, here we go. We're always being supplied with this energy, this aware energy, because we are awareness. So we're this unlimited resource of energy, but we take this energy and we use this energy to build ourselves and to create ourselves and to make ourselves bigger and to make ourselves stronger. Instead, by starving yourself, by not using that energy to do that, instead you're losing that energy to actually lessen yourself. It's doing two things. One, it's making you more of your true nature, which is the emptiness part of yourself, the silent part of yourself, but it's actually helping everybody else around you, because you've heard the expression before, if you want to help the world, help yourself. Don't try to change others. Don't try to make other people be the things. You make yourself a better person, and that's how you're helping the world. So by starving yourself, that's when you're feeling the energy, to where usually this is a dynamic to where you're building yourself. You're participating in that dynamic that we always do, where you're showing how good you are or what you know and all these things. By not doing that anymore, by not following that path, instead following the path of trying to elevate the other person and put your attention on the other person, it feels like starving at first, but that energy is transmuted into a joy. So that same energy that we experience as starvation it's the same energy, but it's experienced as joy instead of starvation. It transmutes. You're actually changing the energy. And I don't know if you heard my last talk, but I drew an analogy to intermittent fasting, to where I talked about the hunger pains. Anyone that hasn't eaten for a while, we experience these hunger pains. But what science has realized is that these hunger pains are really just a chemical in us to drive us to hunt or to forage for food or something like that. So it's actually energy that we translate as an unpleasant experience. But if you were to spend any time in that feeling, it actually becomes a pleasurable feeling, because you're transmuting it. Or is that the word, transmuting it or transferring it? I don't know. Kind of like the runner's high, when people take the pain of the running and all of a sudden it clicks over, and all of a sudden that pain is transmuted into an endorphin rush. So they get a high. So, hi, Judy. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing really good.
Good. My question got brought up by some of these things that you recently answered. When I'm in that place where everything is one and it's this flow, that kind of deal, every so often I find myself looking out of somebody else's eyes. And I think you alluded to that about your daughter.
Yeah.
And how is it, though, that it for her doesn't matter how long I spend there, I never understand, I never see from that other person's point of view. I still am stuck. There's
Yes.
still enough me there.
Yes, I think that's an awesome subject. That's a perfect question. The basic answer is because you still have a body. That's really it. As long as you still have a body, you're still going to have all the tensions, all the identifications, all the thoughts. Nothing is going to change. As long as you have a body, none of that's going to change. The only thing that you're going to be able to change is your orientation. Your what's the word I'm looking for? Your physical orientation, or your what's the word I'm looking for? I think orientation is the best word I could come for. The relationship you have with the world. That's the only thing that changes. So in one sense, you, like right now, most people out there, they think that they're a person in the world. So you're looking at it, you're starting off with, there's a world first, and I'm a person walking in the world. Whereas the opposite perception would be that you're just the space and everyone else is in you as space. So it's basically just changing what you're identifying with, where your position is. That's what I talk about, the backing up exercise. By backing up and by keep practicing backing up, you're going to see that all these thoughts are in front of you, the identifications in front of you. So if these things are in front of you, they're obviously not you. You're perceiving them. If you're perceiving them, it's obviously not you. So by backing up, you're starting to identify more with the space that is the capacity for these things. And we've been so long identifying with being in the world, because that's what we're trained from the very beginning. The only thing that changes, the world doesn't go away. You just see the world for what it is, which is contents that are inside of you rather than you being inside of it. So yeah, I guess the answer to your question is no, the world doesn't go away. It's just a different orientation to it.
Right. So it's every so often there's, okay, once in a while, I feel like I pop into another person, but I don't kind of invade their internal self, right? Their privacy. I mean, once in a while, I will be a tree looking at, like as though I were perceiving from the point of view of the tree, or the, a wall, or it doesn't matter what it is. But it's so interesting to be able to change that. Okay, for the focused, no, yeah, I guess focus. So normally the focus is from this self. And then occasionally, especially if I look at something intently while I'm in that situation, like maybe I'm enjoying a photo, a picture or something, and mostly it's living things. But if I'm really enjoying a tree, I may find myself truly being that tree, and instead of looking from me, the looking is from the tree out to the world, kind of thing.
I'm gonna say I think that's a very rare experience. I've actually never read about anyone ever experiencing anything like that, except for myself. You're the first person I've heard about that from anybody. I could tell you since that experience, I've read some things scientifically that give me some reason to think what it may be scientifically. Now, just because it may have a scientific explanation still doesn't change the fact that all this is awareness. But I actually wrote about this in my book. And especially when you're bringing it up about the tree and everything like that, other life forms. What scientists discovered is that we have something called mirror cells. We have they're neurons. They're neurons that fire in our brains. So in our brains, the neurons that control our thinking and our perceptions, some of these cells are called mirror cells. And what they do is they allow us to empathize with people. So when you're talking to somebody, it's kind of like if you ever see somebody with a cut and then all of a sudden you feel like, oh, now I feel like I want to protect my hand. Or if you see somebody with a piercing in a painful place, you're like, oh, my nose. That is because of our mirror cells. We all have mirror cells. So when we see somebody, we can have with empathy or sympathy with them. So from a biological standpoint, they understand that with mirror cells. So since I had the experience where I saw from my daughter's eyes, years later, when I read about these mirror cells, I wrote in the book, I said, perhaps, what we're calling this experience of oneness or, a peak experience, perhaps it's our mirror cells all being lined up at once, which, like I said, is a rare experience. I've never, yours is the first account I've ever heard of anybody. When I wrote about it, I didn't ever think anybody else had experienced that. But like I said, I thought it was interesting that we have something called mirror cells. And one explanation I came up with, I was like, it could just be that all of the mirror cells are all aligned. And so you're completely relating to that tree and you're experiencing what it's like to be that tree, or in my case, my daughter, or in the next vision, it was everything. And the next, when I backed up from being my daughter, I was behind the eyes of everything simultaneously. But you brought up a cool point that I never brought up until now. When I first talked about the experience, I just kind of left it out there, that I was behind the eyes and I saw behind everything. But as I was writing the book, or I should say writing book 2 and 3, I remembered something that I never wrote in book 1, but you just mentioned it right now. Even though I was behind the eyes of my daughter, you're right, I was not privy to her thoughts, all the tiny little things. And I remember thinking, well, I don't know, she was only 10 years old. Maybe she wasn't having any thoughts. I don't know what it's like to be 10 years old, but it was the experiences just like yours. Even though I was from behind her eyes and seeing what she was seeing, I wasn't privy to any thoughts. And that's something that I never thought of until this year when I was rewriting 2 and 3. When I was going, because I'm reliving the experience, I'm going back and remembering everything so I could write it down. And it struck me that when I had that vision when I was behind my daughter, and then when it backed out further to where I was the eye behind the eyes of everything, every living being, I had no recall of any of the people's individual thoughts. I was behind the eyes of everything, Gary, Peter, Joan, Becky, everybody, but I was not privy to their thoughts. So it reminded me of, how people see the absolute or God or the Godhead or anything like that. The absolute or the manifest would have no idea of the tiny mannequinistics of your life, the tiny little things, just because of the perspective, the sheer perspective. You can't get into the nuance of the tiny little things. So it just reminded me, I thought of how comical for people to ever think like there's a God looking through an experience, which by the way, I said, I'm the one that said it, that there's only one eye looking through all the eyes, but to interpret that as, what do you call it, on a micro level, to where that thing would be experiencing all the crazy thoughts of me, all the crazy thoughts of Joan. That's not it. When you're experiencing that everything at once, there are no individual thoughts. It's just everything at once. To have the experience of individual thoughts, you have to squeeze into the aperture that we're in right now, the black hole. Back here, there are no thoughts. There are no nothing. And so you're not aware of anything because it's not there. It's only when you zoom in to one particular black hole that we have all these crazy things happening. So I think that's a cool point, Judy, and that basically that's extremely consistent with mine that I've never even wrote about. I just said out loud, but I'm glad to hear you say that because number one, you're only the second person I talked to that had that experience, and your experience is identical in the sense that you were not privy to any of their particular thoughts or anything, just from seeing from their perspective. I think that's just the nature of the design of how it works. So thank you. That's awesome, Judy. I appreciate that.
Well, that really helps me quite a bit because when there's a level of awareness or depth of awareness, I should say, that when I'm there, I don't, really, there's no thoughts.
Nothing, there's nothing exactly. Yep.
And there's experience, and I can sometimes recall the experience and other times not at all, but maybe it's because of that thought.
I think it's the nature.
I felt like it was because of an absence of enough sense of self, of individual me, Judy Project.
Yep.
And when I really let go of the Judy Project, there's what is. It's just this.
Yeah. Okay. That's, oh God, I don't want to completely switch the subject, but this reminds me of something I was talking about maybe with Kirk the other day. I was talking about lucid dreaming and finding this balance. I called it about sitting on the tip of the knife's edge. It's exactly what you're talking about. There's a practice when you're doing lucid dreaming is really good for practicing awareness, because if you do get into lucid dreaming, at least what happened to me is I became so lucid that I was like, well, this is silly. I'm just making this up. Why don't I just wake up? It's not even fun. I'm just making things up. So you had to give up some of your lucidity. But then if you gave up some of your lucidity, now you're swept up into the dream and you're getting chased by monsters and it's no longer fun anymore. So there was a fine line to where you had to draw to where you wanted to be lucid, but not be too lucid. And what you're talking about is reminding me of these two modes. There's two modes. Either you're lucid and everything. If you're too lucid, like I said, it just seems like you're just daydreaming. Like I'm just closing my eyes and using my imagination. You have to give up some of that lucidity to make this real like this. Remember before I was saying this whole reality is barely being held together by a thread of our attention. It's the same thing with our dreams. Our dreams are barely held together. The slightest bit of lucidity is going to make the whole thing puff away. The same thing with this world. The slightest bit of lucidity is going to make the whole thing puff away. We're barely holding this tension together. But I want to get back to your point. There's this weird balance where there's two modes. Either you're completely silent and then boom, like Judy said, you're seeing the tree, but there's no thoughts, or you're seeing behind someone, but there's no thoughts. Or if you go into thoughts, now you're back into you and now you're back into a funnel. I think, like I guarantee it's got something to do with either a position or a change. All there is energy, and just the way we direct that energy with a funnel or something. Like I said, I vision it as energy bending up on itself. And that creates that tension of awareness, where you have awareness of awareness. There's still only one awareness, but now awareness is aware of awareness. So what I like about what Judy's saying, it's coming back to the singular. There's only two modes, whether it's the lucid dreaming or, dreaming where you're swept up into it, or this mode that Judy's talking about, to where you could either be just the witness, just the experiencer with no thoughts, but the minute you get close enough, you get sucked in, and now you're having all the thoughts, but now you're in your own private little black hole or anything. So that's why I think, Judy, even though I could get behind your eyes or you could get behind my eyes, you're never going to be able to get inside the thoughts, because getting inside the thoughts would be have to go inside that tight little black hole, which is me. So, oops. So anyway, I hope that, thank you. Thanks for saying that, Judy. I appreciate that. And I see Michael with his hand up, but are you satisfied with everything, Judy, before we go on to Michael? Good deal. All right. Thank you, Judy. Hi, Michael. You got the floor.
So, let me turn the hand down. So yeah, I was interested in the mirror cells and increasing the connection, and I was wondering, well, what is it that makes my, I'll say, more dominant mode, I, me, mine, what makes it the constantly running program? And it sounds like from what you were just saying at the end with Judy is that it's thoughts. Is that, and maybe I mistook what you were saying, but what is it that makes the I, me, mine programming dominant, at least here?
Yeah. Yes. Well, the short answer would be, like you just said, the thoughts themselves are creating it. But I want to get back more into the dynamic of what I think creates it, which is what's in the trianistic model of reality. The way I experiencing it is the reason that we have this I thing, the reason that we have this notion towards I is because it's built into the natural design of awareness in the first place. If you consider what awareness is, all awareness is awareness. The nature of awareness is to be aware. So its very nature is to be aware. So that energy of awareness is attracting. It's like a magnetic power where it wants to be aware of something. But because there is nothing else but awareness, awareness would have no choice but to spontaneously bend to meet itself from that nature of awareness. Because if awareness is aware, like I said, it's a magnetic energy of being aware of something. But since there's nothing else, that awareness would have no choice but to fold up on itself. So it creates that dynamic that I was just describing where you have awareness of awareness. So it appears as two, but it's still just one. It's always just one, but that bending, that attraction to itself is what creates what we now call consciousness. So before it bends, there's just awareness, undifferentiated awareness. I wish I had a piece of paper I could do this with, but all you have is undifferentiated awareness. And then as differentiated awareness bends to meet itself, so this is undifferentiated, just flat, no differentiation. But from that attraction coming together to meet itself, that is what I think creates the I. Thank you, Gary. You got something better than me. That's what creates the I. It's built in to the nature of awareness. Exactly. It's attracted to itself. So that is what's creating the sense of an I, is that closed loop. When that loop closes in on itself, the awareness experiences itself as itself because it has a reference. You can't have an I unless you have another. Once you have that two, you have an I and you have a you. So the I is created along with the other. And that's why in the Zen practice is to get to the point where you see past the others. You see that there is no you and you see that there is no others. There's just this, which is just awareness. So to answer your question, the I is built into the natural design of what awareness is. It has no choice but to create the I. And that's another reason why I say we should be easy on ourselves. We should not be judgmental on ourselves. We should not look at the I as a mistake or the ego as a mistake or selfhood as a mistake or the individual as a mistake. It's inevitable. It's inevitable. It's the nature of the design for undifferentiated awareness to evolve to conscious awareness. So you have awareness unaware of anything, but because of that attraction coming to aware of itself, now awareness becomes conscious. So we are the movement from, let's say, undifferentiated awareness to conscious awareness. That's what the I is. So again, to answer your questions, I think it's there because it's built into it. It has no choice to be there. By the way, I don't think there's any design. I don't think anyone created all this. I just think all there is awareness. And because of all there is awareness, all these natural laws are springing up. All the bending, all the attracting, all the magnetation, all the transmutation, all the changing, all these things are a result of the fact that all there is awareness, and awareness has no choice but to become aware of itself, creating the appearance of an I. And then because there is no I, then that I goes through the process of realizing there is no I. And here we are in the circle again. So to answer your question again, I like to wrap things up. I think the I is created from the natural power of attraction of awareness itself. The power of attraction of awareness itself. Really good question, by the way. And by the way, I like these questions, even simple questions, you know, what is the I? How do we know there's an I? I mean, these are the deepest questions. And I like this because this is making me feel more excited about the stuff I'm really excited about talking about, which is the trinistic model of reality. So I feel like we've really tackled that subject. All these 3 talks have been on surrendering, not struggling. Basically, all of my books are about 3 different aspects, either non-ordinary experiences, such as like Judy's described, or suffering, which is what we've talked about for the last 3 times, or awareness itself, which is the trinistic model of reality. So those are really the only 3 things I feel like I'm capable of talking about. And I think that all these talks we just had were all towards the surrendering and not struggling. And this is the first time I'm walking away with the conversation without lingering things to say. After I walked away from every talk, I feel like, oh man, I wish I would have said this and that. But I feel like we satiated that subject. So yeah, unless somebody has any ideas over the next month, I think the next talk I'll start to introduce the trinistic model of reality. So we'll go into some of these things. And by the way, the reason this is important, because in order for you to give up the struggle, in order for you to practice surrendering, it has to come from a place of an insight. It has to come from a natural insight that you recognize that you have an authentic recognition yourself that changes the way you think, that changes your perception of the world. I refer to it as a cycle of 3 things. It starts off, actually you could start it anywhere, but I started with trust. It has to start from a basic trust. Once you have that basic trust, whatever it is, trust in Jesus, trust in the universe, whatever it is, just find something you trust in and trust it, because you need that trust to be able to surrender, which is the second part. And once you truly surrender, you're going to be rewarded with an insight. And that insight is going to give you a genuine, that insight is going to give you a genuine different perspective of life that is going to instill more trust in you. And then that trust is going to enable you to surrender more. And then that surrendering is going to provide another insight. And that insight is going to provide you the more trust. So there's a circle of thing where you get into where you're realizing this needs to come from the automatic. This can't come from rules. It can't come from a book. It has to come from the very center of my being. And well, to wrap up, the not struggling with everything, that's what I think we cover. Oh, I know. Getting back to the trinistic model of reality. So the reason the trinistic model of reality is important is because this actually gives you genuine insights into who you are, your true nature. So it provides you that trust, so you could surrender, so you could get more insights, so you could trust more, so you could surrender more, so you could get more insights. So the trinistic model, it sounds a little heady. It sounds a little bit like, you know, what does this got to do with my life? I'm dealing with people every day. This sounds very conceptual, but it is, or at least for me, I don't think everybody's the same. I think it's possible to go your whole life and never know anything about the trinistic model of reality and get complete enlightenment based on a whole different other, you know, set of circumstances. But for me, I really had to understand the relationship between the one and the many. It wasn't enough for people to just tell me that you're the one and that the many, it's just an illusion, and just trust me, you're the one. The illusion stuff, that's in the many, just trust me, you're the one. For me, I couldn't. I had to really understand in my heart and see that the one was the many and understand it. And that's what the trinistic model was. It shows you yourself. So you have the, I guess I could say experience. Yeah, the experience of seeing the rainbow as the white light. So yeah, I think we'll get into that next time. And now we're definitely getting late. So does anybody have anything else on the subject, especially the surrendering and struggling, since if there is no more, I'm going to turn a corner to the next talk. So this would be a really good time if anybody's any lingering thoughts on the surrendering, struggling, stuff like that. I like it. If you got no more, cool. That makes me think we got it. But it only took 4 talks. All right, so I guess that's it. Does anybody else have anything to say before I wrap it up and say goodbye to everybody? Nope. Okay. Again, thank you. And again, by the way, anybody, even if you regretted any part of this conversation, you could contact me in a month and say, hey, you know what? I don't like what I said. I don't like the shirt I was wearing. I don't, erase it. I'm like that. I'm not, I'm getting more from you guys, enjoying more and betting for any more that, no matter what, I'm going to do this, but I just want to make sure everybody has a chance. Everybody has a talk, and I don't want anybody feel excluded. So again, if anybody ever wants, I want this on YouTube because the reason I'm doing this is I don't like to repeat myself. So there's all of us have the same common questions. We're all wonder the same things. So I like to, when people say things, have broad subjects I could just point them to. And that's why if you look at my podcast, it's the same thing. I'm just taking on broad subjects, talking about the triadic model of reality, talking about these things, so I could just point them to this one thing. So I appreciate you guys letting me do that. And again, like I said, we're all working together. We continue each other. We complete each other. So if anybody ever has any, edits they want to make, just tell me. It's my YouTube. I can just go in there and splice it up, cut it out, and it's never remembered. But I don't want anybody to feel like they can't ask anything. And it wouldn't stop the flow. Next time, if anybody said, hey, by the way, I'm about to ask you a question, just mark this time. We don't have to stop the tape or anything. I would just make a little note saying Gary doesn't want this little dirty secret coming out, so I'm going to have to edit out Gary. So please, I want everybody to, keep participating. So thank you. And that's it for me, unless Gary wants to wrap it up any other way. Thank you guys. And I'll see you next month. And we'll talk about the trianistic model.
Unless somebody has any final words, I just want to say two quick things. So, Mark, I don't think we have, as I mentioned, we'll be doing this every month, and I think it's going to be a great series. So we don't have a date for August, but as soon as we do, we'll put it out there. And also, Mark, I'd like you to get a little blurb together real fast so we can put it out and prime the pump for next month, because these talks are just, I feel the momentum in our community is just building. So I don't have anything to say. Anyone else? If not, we'll just stop the recording and see you guys next month.
Thank you guys for all the questions. Go ahead, Michael.
Next time.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Judy.
Thank
All right,
you.
bye-bye, guys. Have a great 4th of July, no matter what country you're in.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Gary, too.
Okay, guys, thanks. I'm going to stop the recording right now.